Welcome to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast, coming to you from Dallas, Texas. Here's your host, Tim Wilkins.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. All right, today's topic, it's a celebratory topic. If you're from the 203 or the 860 or whatever other area code that's in Connecticut nowadays, since we live in the 21st century, it is the return of arguably, which we have debated this, Chris, on who is the best UConn coach of all time. But Dan Hurley is definitely up there in the upper echelons of the upper hemisphere of great coaches of all time. Jim Calhoun is still arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest. Gino, I'm sorry, dude. You're the highest paid teacher / administrator / state employee of the state, for obvious reasons. But yeah, today's topic's a fun one, Chris, man, because when that news broke, I actually was getting lunch from our favorite sub establishment known as Jersey Mike's. And I was getting me some lunch, and then I walked into the restaurant or the place, the sandwich shop, and it's on the TV that Dan Hurley is staying at UConn. I was pretty excited. I kind of grown man popped there. I was having a good time because not saying I hate Los Angeles, but yes, as Shuri Bob, I hate Los Angeles. But it was a good time, man. But
yeah, no, I mean, I will admit I had not been following the NBA much this year, and I didn't even realize that they were looking for a coach. So I did see Dan Hurley's name pop up maybe a week or two ago as a potential.
That's actually how it happened.
And I said to myself, I'm like, well, I mean, listen, I mean, you know, use a term that's overused at this point. Everybody wants the bag. So I mean, is there a possibility he could leave stores and go out to LA and coach in the NBA? I mean, obviously, obviously, family, it's got so much, ties to, whether it's college or pro basketball. But I mean, definitely a case that, we don't see as much, especially now with the, days of the transfer portal and the NIL. But I mean, when you got something good going and, I mean, sometimes staying at home is better than the grass not always being greener.
And I think if you look at the full picture of that negotiation, and by the way, that's actually exactly how it happened, Chris, was last week is his name came up. It was pretty fast in that conversation. He listened to the offer by Jenny Butt, and to the whole leadership group of the Lakers. He flew home. And the decision wasn't made public until, earlier in this week, the work week. But it was, you can tell the longer it stretched out as fans of the UConn Huskies, the longer it stretched out, the better off that we were going to be. Because if you get offered a huge boatload of cash, which, by the way, it was 6 years, $70 million to Dan Hurley. He just signed an extension at UConn as well, which... Yes, is he making significantly less money? Sure. Is there room for more money and more revenue, or I would say bigger contract at a later date? Sure. I don't disagree with that. But there was obviously a reason why Dan Hurley decided to stay at UConn. Is it the fact that he is back-to-back and hopefully another one back-to-back, going for his third time back-to-backs, national champion? Sure. Or the fact that there's some economics involved here, Chris. We both grew up in the 203. And arguably, it is not a cheap state to live in. So there obviously it's not cheap to live in the city of Los Angeles either. So there is some economics probably involved there. Obviously, he's a family man. He has a wife and kids, and obviously his grown son, I think, is playing for the UConn Huskies. To understand the history, I think, Chris, though, is this guy is not some just schmo off the street. He's a son of a legacy coach in the New England in the tri-state area. And that family name, Hurley, in the Big East is pretty well known. His brother, I believe, coaches at Arizona State now.
Yeah, of course, Bobby Hurley was a part
Yep.
of those Duke teams in the early '90s with Christian
Mhm.
Laettner and Grant Hill, and yeah, no, I mean, there's the Hurley name is so well known in
So
basketball around.
I don't discredit his coaching ability by any means at all. I don't think anyone can. I think there's a underlying issue here of why he didn't accept a job in Los Angeles. And I'm going to bring it to the forefront here now. It's the Los Angeles Lakers organization. The organization as a whole. I'm not a LeBron James fan, never have, never will be. Sorry, do I recognize talent? Absolutely. Is he a talented basketball player? Sure. But the ownership group and the leadership and the coaching have drastically over the last, ever since the late Kobe Bryant, arguably anyone can agree it has not been the same. Yes, did they win a championship without Kobe? Unfortunately, yes, Kobe, and it was during a COVID lockdown bubble era. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. Which honestly shouldn't even count for anything because you're playing in a bubble, like you're not even traveling for games. But you're offering a coach a 6 years, $70 million deal to coach arguably, and I don't use this myself personally because I don't agree with this term, one of the greatest of all times in basketball. There had to be a reason why. And Chris, I think you and I both watched sports long enough in our lifetime that if you were Dan Hurley as a grown man, we're not even talking about the legacy of the Hurley name. If you're just a grown ass man, a professional basketball coach, would you have gone for that money? That's the stemming of this whole conversation of this episode, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's look at it from this perspective. I mean, I think if this was the Lakers of the early 2000s, you had Kobe and you had Shaq, and you also had Dr. Jerry Buss still alive and owning the team. Do I think he would have taken the deal? Absolutely. Do I think now with Jeannie, his daughter, running the team and a different climate here in the NBA, you have LeBron James, who, I think is, make no moans about it. I mean, it's his team. A lot of ways he makes a lot of the personnel calls. So, any coach that you're not going to, in some ways, coach over LeBron. LeBron's also 40 years old, going to be 40 years old this December. So you have an aging star, you have really an aging franchise. And again, I don't follow the NBA near as much as I used to. I just money just was not worth it. I don't think it was worth it to Dan Hurley. I think he's making good money at UConn. I'm sure there'll be if he wins another national title, there's no reason why that he couldn't get another pay bump. I mean, do I think eventually an NBA job, whether it be here on the East Coast, whether it be in Boston or New York or Brooklyn or somewhere on the East Coast, if another job becomes available, could I see him potentially jumping on a job after in the future? I absolutely. But to me, he would have he just doesn't seem like he would have been a fit out there in Los Angeles and with the makeup of this franchise and of this team. I think it was a great move for him to stay in stores and focus on what he has, and hopefully that'll be more of a more of a coaches looking at it from a holistic standpoint, saying, hey, is it really worth the money? I mean, you look at guys like Pete Carroll, his short run in well, he had really two stints in the NFL, obviously first with the Jets back in the 90s and then with the Seahawks. But then you look at Lou Holtz,
you forgot the New England Patriots, sir. You forgot his stint with the
Patriots. Well, I mean, as a head coach, you look at Lou Holtz when he was in the NFL. You look at Nick Saban. You look at Steve Spurrier. I mean, there have been so many of these college coaches, and again, I know heavy on, I mean, John Calipari, if you want to talk about basketball, his short run with the New Jersey Nets back in the 90s and early 2000s. I mean, there have been so many of these college coaches who've had a ton of success who have attempted to go to the NBA, and it just hasn't worked out because you're really dealing with while you're dealing with basketball players, and a lot of these kids are not far removed from college. You're dealing from, I'll use in quotation marks, amateur athletes to professional athletes. It's apples to oranges.
I just think the last time we saw this on the Lakers front try to go for a college splash was Coach K, and it didn't work out. And they should have learned from the first time that you're not going to get Coach K. Why it makes you think you're going to get Dan Hurley? Because Coach K was coming off a back-to-back national championship run as well. And Coach K, if you want to talk about the antithesis of or the of the standard bearer college coach in college basketball, it was him. So
Yeah.
what makes you think, and arguably, I know you live in Carolina, so you can argue with me on this one. The coaches of the North Carolina Tar Heels and Duke were the same, and it's just it's different,
Yeah. I mean, you look at guys. It's not uncommon to have, guys who are lifers in college basketball. I mean, you go back, you look at Jim Boeheim, you look at, obviously, said Mike Krzyzewski, you look at, um, you know, the late John Thompson. I mean, there's been guys who have. I know I was heavy on the Big East there, but you look at guys like, yeah, I mean, obviously, I mean, Roy Williams and Dean Smith. I mean, there's been tons of coaches who, everyone say, oh, why they go to the NBA? I mean, yeah, I mean, in some ways, was there probably availability for them to go? Yes, but I feel like there's some guys you look at and they are just college coaches, and they're fine with that. I think it's just, again, it is very difficult. It's a challenge, and very few coaches are able to go from the college game to the pro game, even though basically in some ways they're completely the same now. I mean, maybe at some point there was a difference between them, but now as time has gone along, you have things like the NIL, you have the transfer portal, you have the one and dones. You're really you're essentially getting college kids, in the NBA who probably should be stay and play for 4 years, and play their full eligibility to really hone their skills. But when it comes down to it, they want the money. So,
well, that's the thing too, is the NIL has actually drastically and this is why the influx of the NIL, and being a huge college basketball fan that I am, it's not like football. It wasn't like the football era. Yes, is there still an influx of money that is being paid to the basketball player on the college level on these bigger programs? Yes. But what you're seeing now is a difference between football and basketball when it comes to the NIL money spend. Also, these players that are being paid, or not just a scholarship, but being paid for name, image, and likeness, they're staying for 4 years. Especially on the UConn side, there are seniors in higher and upper level, an upperclassmen that stayed because of what they were doing as a program. During the basketball in the last 10 years or so, Chris, and this is where me watching enough college basketball, you were seeing a lot of that one and done nonsense because there was no, how do you want to say, return of investment. If you were getting offered $30 million to turn pro, to be a first rounder, then yes, I can understand you leaving. The one and done rule is still in effect, but the NIL money, the name, image, and likeness has definitely helped out on the college basketball routine. On the football level, it is the most toxic thing of all time. Is it still toxic on the basketball sometimes? Yes, but a lot of the good teams will keep those players around, and they would find money. Hey, would you mind playing for, we see it more on the college basketball on the women's side too. Paige, Buckets from UConn. A lot of the big name players have made huge advertising money from, let's say, Gatorade and all this name stuff. And I see it being more beneficial for name, image, and likeness on the other sports as well. So I know that's a different topic on a different episode, but it's important to me to bring up this point that, in my opinion, the college level game is drastically different than the pro game, because realistically, it's the level of recruiting that goes on the college level, that goes on to the oversight by the coach. Really, the pro level, the coach is really just another guy. Okay, and I hate to say it like that. Yes, there's levels to it, but reality, Chris, is that the professional level, when you get to a professional basketball coach, you, unless you're adding something to it, you're just another guy. At the college level, that is your organization, from the type of player to the type of defense to the type of offense you run, all of that, the players that you recruit, everything is yours. And
Yeah.
also, a lot of these teams are also, like, for example, I know I made a joke about Gino Auriemma being the highest paid employee. These guys do make sizable amount of money, and they're not all private universities. So they do affect the bottom line of the state. And I hate to say this, but UConn has seen a huge influx of great athletes come in and through those doors and provide awesome, awesome experiences for those students to get a record 5-star education from the university. And do they stay there all the time? A lot of NCAA athletes, not all of them turn pro. So if we offer you a 5-star opportunity to be educated, I think it's a good return of investment. That's just me. And that's just being a UConn grad. Sorry, UNC. Sorry, Duke, but go Huskies.
I mean, I look at it, I think, and when you look at Dan Hurley, he's been at UConn since 2018. You see his kind of banter on the sidelines. He's as into the game as the players are and as the fans are. I don't, his kind of court bravado to me doesn't really match up much to the NBA game, in my opinion. When you look at a lot of coaches in the NBA who are a lot more subdued, he kind of comes off as a true college coach. And I think a lot of it too, and
He's also a kid from the northeast part of the world, dude, and that is the bravado of it too.
Yeah, he's a Jersey guy, but like you got to look at it too as well. I mean, a lot of it, some of it's a control thing. Like Nick Saban. I mean, he said, one of the reasons why he walked away was, I don't have control like I used to have. These guys in a lot of ways are control freaks. They want to have control over their team. They want to have control over their assistant coaches. They want to have control over the program. And I think, again, college football compared to college basketball are two kind of totally different things in a lot of ways. But I think, college basketball coaches still are able to have some semblance of control of their team, compared to college, compared to college football, and definitely way different compared to the NBA. So, no, I mean, I think it's great for college basketball. I mean, I think this is a great thing for college basketball, and to keep continuity in college basketball, which I think a lot of people long after, is to have some continuity year after year and not have the constant, movement of players and coaches and things like that. So I think that this is as a whole, this is a good thing for college basketball. And I think it'll obviously only play out here in the fall and into the next year, and see if they can repeat another national championship. But
I think another big thing that we're both forgetting out of all this is that the Big East is making a return back. And the Big East is just naturally, I mean, the Big East as a whole, as a conference, is starting to become more and more pronounced as it was back when we were kids. And Dan Hurley sticking around makes that a juggernaut. Just throwing that out there to everybody. Like, it obviously, we're missing Syracuse if you're going to go back to the purest of Big East schools. But to me, it's the Big East is still one of the most powerhouse conferences when it comes to college basketball, and to keep arguably number one coach in the United States of America in the Big East Big East conference is pretty awesome. Now, Is it going to be returning to the heydays of the 90s where you got, Georgetown and you got plenty of other schools, Villanova, and it's going to take some time. But I think college basketball in the east part of the coast of the world is rejoicing in this fact because we have an opportunity. And I think if you understand, Chris, Dan Hurley knew that the decision that he was going to make was going to impact other people. Like, I think collectively you had students that committed to coming back for another year. You had coaches, assistant coaches, livelihoods of being affected. I think he didn't want that to lay up in limbo. I know we're not even in basketball season yet. We're in June. Okay. No basketball season doesn't start till, no, late in the year. So I think that had a lot to do with the timeline. But I think when the longer that went on, the wait to find out the announcement, the better off we were at UConn. I think Lakers were hoping they kind of threw a Hail Mary pass out there and, let them have it. JJ Redick can have that team. Let them have it. Be a yes man to LeBron. I can care less. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big thing there is like, I think part of it too, and I'm sure some people have talked about it, is like, you know, coaching a team like that in that market with the expectations of ownership and that fan base. I mean, that's a powder keg, that probably wouldn't last very long for him, and that would ultimately hurt his stock. So he's like, listen, do I really want to go be involved in a situation like that, where it's only guaranteed that maybe I'll get 2 years, and then I'm out of a job, and then I've got to basically start over again, and hurt my stock as a coach, who's coming off consecutive national titles. I mean, to me, it's just not the money's just not worth it. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze, and that's probably a bigger a bigger self-reflection for the Lakers franchise, that you can't even land a top collegiate coach to come out to one of the biggest markets, one of the most storied franchises in NBA history, who doesn't want to take a really nice salary to come out there and coach. And that just, there might need to be a little bit of self-reflection, but we know that a lot of times people don't self-reflect. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's truly fascinating. This whole situation there.
Yeah, man. And the thing is, I'll put this in closing, is that it kind of stems to a bigger point of this conversation, is that Hurley is coaching for there are other reasons, right? I think the first time a coach has ever gone triple back-to-backs and a national championship run is pretty big. I think also being an East Coaster helps out a lot for longevity. He knows what he gets on the East Coast. He knows the bravado, the attitude that goes with the East Coast crowds. He obviously has a strong family connection to the East Coast. And I think universally, the man just made a grown man decision saying, I'm going to stay where I'm at because grass isn't always greener 3,000 miles away. And I'm not saying the Lakers, that's a daunting schedule. Think about that for a second. The basketball season for the NBA starts almost around Thanksgiving, and they're not done yet. Right? They're not done yet. And that doesn't include the offseason. So it's almost a year-round commitment. And I think as a guy that favors and caters, wants that, I think he's in no wrong or reason to do that. Now, listen, is UConn going to offer him a bigger money payout later on? Sure. Who knows? But I'll be interested to see it because it's only good, really good results and just being a good coach, I think, that matter. So, Chris, I appreciate you joining me, buddy. Appreciate the quick episode here because this is a good newsworthy topic of this week. But appreciate it as always, my friend. Hopefully everyone has a great weekend and stay dry, stay vigilant for all you severe weather out there. And try to enjoy some sports. This is the dog days of sports, my friend. But Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, man. Good.
Thank you for listening to the Yankee Cowboy Podcast. Feel free to follow us on social media via Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook.